I only have a working relationship with Gary, and that's how it's going to stay.
Sorry, Anne. I certainly didn't mean to offend you. I'm quite aware that you are an intelligent young woman who can keep men like Gary at a distance. In any case, I just wanted to warn you. I'm sure you'll agree with me once you get to know him.
Yes, to be honest, I am a bit worried. Profits are down 8% over the last few months. Oh. And just yesterday, I read an article in Media World that confirmed my suspicions. Forecasts for the publishing market are quite pessimistic. And the general feeling is that things are going to continue to go downhill based on current trends. The next 5 years could see a further drop of 20%. If we leave out bestsellers and fiction, then the entire publishing market has taken a direct hit. Or, better, is in a downward spiral.
But what about sales?
For the moment, they're stationary, but we won't be able to improve them. In fact, we'll have to stop publication of our encyclopedias of history and art history, with awful consequences for those working on these projects.
Are you saying that we'll have to lay people off?
No, not for the moment. But if things continue like they are, we will have to let some of our people go.
Oh my God. There must be something we can do to keep from cutting staff.
I'm meeting with Mr. Stevens this afternoon to discuss the situation. We're going to focus on new objectives for the company in both marketing and sales. Perhaps we will develop a new line of economic paperbacks, which might help sales.
But the other publishers are already doing that successfully. I think we'll need to develop new products to encourage new market opportunities.
Well said, Billy. I've already got an idea to suggest. It won't resolve all of our problems, but it could bring about some interesting developments.
And what might this new idea be?
Anne!
Well...
Anne, are you in there? Hey, you! I'm looking for my friend Anne. Is she with you? Anne! Surprise!
Anne, hello. Come back to Earth. Someone's looking for you.
Anne! Alice! What are you doing here?
Well, I came to see where you work, Anne. Could you give me a tour? So, these are your colleagues. Oh. What long faces. Are you always like this? We need a little fun to lighten things up in here. Why don't you invite them to the party this evening?
No, really. I don't think, well, today's really not a good time to be talking about parties. Why don't you come back some other time? And perhaps warn me in advance, perhaps. Bye-bye, Alice.
So there you heard them talking about the crisis that the company is going through, and unfortunately that happens often when there's an economic crisis in the country. So let's look at the language that we use to describe a period of crisis in a company, and let's use the screen to help us. So what usually happens is that there's a bad forecast. The future doesn't look good, and there are negative trends, negative tendencies. So what happens? Things start going downhill, we say. A hill is like a small mountain. Things start going downhill. And then the company goes through a period of crisis. Then, if it's really bad, we talk about the company being in deep crisis. That's the worst situation to be in. But if it's not so bad, it's just temporary, we can talk about a passing crisis, a passing crisis. And then when things get better again, we usually say to recover from a crisis. Now, a crisis can actually have quite an effect on employment. And now I want to look at the language that we use in English to describe employment. It's very interesting because we have many different words to describe that, and maybe in your languages too. So, let's look at the screen. Think of an employee. When an employee goes into a company for the first time, we say in English that he or she joins the company. Now, when they decide to go, they leave the company or they resign. We say they resign. That's because they don't want to work anymore there. The pronunciation resign. Now, if they reach a certain age, they retire. Retire. If they decide to retire before the age of 65 or 60, we say to take early retirement. Early retirement. So those are the words which are usually related to the employees. But what about the companies? Well, companies, when they take people, companies recruit. That's difficult to pronounce. Recruit. Companies recruit employees. Another word is hire, to hire. Another verb is to take on. Now, the opposite is when they send people away, we say companies sack, which is a strange word, isn't it? Sack people, they fire people. And in fact, as I said before, in English we use hiring and firing as the term for employment. So they sack, they fire, they dismiss people, they let go, they let people go, they cut staff, or they lay off. That's another term that we use, lay off. So you can see there are many, many different terms that we use for employment description. Good. Well, that's the language of crisis and the language of employment. So that's all for now, and I'll see you again in the next lessons for more business English. Bye.
Hello and welcome back to Business Talk.
Hi there.
Well, today we're going to talk about giving good presentations in English.
Yes, giving a presentation can be a frightening prospect, but if you understand the psychology behind the business skill, it really is quite simple.
Like most business skills, it's all about communication and using the right kind of language in an effective way, right?
That's right.
But I still think it's an important moment. Obviously, you want to make a good impression, and the fear of boring your listeners can make you very nervous.
Well, in the Anglo-Saxon world, making a good impression usually means demonstrating your ability in teamwork, that you're a good member to have on the team.
Teamwork is all about organisation, and it implies everyone working together. Therefore, the language you use should involve everyone. And of course, you don't want to bore or lose anyone along the way, so keep it simple.
Yes, organization, language, and simplicity are three very important factors when planning a presentation. First, organize what you want to say.
And is there some kind of winning structure for a good presentation?
Definitely. You should always start with a personal introduction, then the subject of your presentation and its purpose. It's a good idea to briefly outline the main points of the presentation and then talk about each point in more detail. At the end, give a short summary of what you've said before your conclusion, and there you go.
You make it sound so simple.
Well, the aim of this structure is in fact to simplify your task. And remember, the #1 rule for giving a good presentation in English is KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it short and simple.
How about giving an example of a presentation?
Okay, well, we don't really have time for a whole presentation, but I'll give you an example of the kind of language and structure I mean. Good morning. I'm Eric Brown, and I'm in charge of quality control here at the plant. This morning, I'd like to talk about a problem we had last week. My aim is to stop this problem happening again. First, I'm going to give you some background information, then I'll fill you in on the details, and finally, we'll look at some possible solutions. So, first of all, let's look at the background.
And here, Eric would give some background information about the problem, so everyone has a clear picture.
Now we're going to try to understand exactly what happened last week.
Here, Eric would talk about the problem we had last week.
And finally, why don't we have a look at some possible solutions?
At which point, Eric would talk about the various solutions to the problem in turn, before saying,
Let me sum up.
Where Eric would briefly summarise the different points he's made during the presentation and move on to the conclusion, starting...
So, now shall we try to draw some conclusions? Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
That was very precise and to the point. Now, it's difficult to remember everything you want to say unless you learn it all by heart, especially if you're nervous. So it's a good idea to have some notes with you.
Of course, you shouldn't read the whole presentation. That could get quite boring, but you do want to get off to a good start, so perhaps writing your introduction word for word is advisable. And then just have the opening sentences of each part of the presentation so you have an outline to follow.
Yes, in case you get lost, you can easily get back on track.
That's right, and speak slowly and clearly. Obviously, try to use emphasis and pauses to highlight the important points.
So, KISS is the key to a good presentation. Keep it short and simple.
And the three fundamental aspects to keep in mind are organization, language, and simplicity. Today, most people use PowerPoint to deliver their presentations. We can't talk about how to use PowerPoint now. Remember to get the language right, and your PowerPoint presentation will be fine.
Good advice. Our time's up, so I'm afraid we have to say goodbye. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Let's look more closely at Eric's presentation and those three important factors to bear in mind when planning a presentation: organization, language, and simplicity. So, the first thing to do is organize what you want to say and give your presentation a clear structure. Let's look at a basic outline for a presentation. Start with a brief personal introduction so everyone knows who you are. Then, introduce the subject and purpose of your presentation. Briefly outline the main points so everyone knows what you will be talking about, and then treat each point in order. It's a good idea to give a short summary of all the points at the end. And finally, a conclusion to close your presentation. Personal introduction. Introduce subject and purpose. Outline the main points. Point 1, point 2, point 3, summary, conclusion. And what about the language? Remember KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it short and simple. Simplicity is essential in every aspect of the presentation, in its organization and the language we use. Short, well-structured sentences that mark the beginning of each part of the presentation are helpful to keep you on track and keep your listeners' attention. Did you notice in Eric's presentation, he marked the start of each new section of the presentation very clearly? Let's look at the language he used and how each point corresponds to the outline we've just seen. I'd like to talk about a problem we had last week. My aim is to stop this problem happening again. First, I'm going to give you some background information, then I'll fill you in on the details, and finally we'll look at some possible solutions. So first of all, let's look at the background. Now we're going to try to understand exactly what happened last week, and finally, why don't we have a look at some possible solutions? Let me sum up. So, now shall we try to draw some conclusions? Notice how the beginning of each section is clearly marked. And remember, team spirit is important. As with brainstorming, it's important that everyone listening feels part of a team. So avoid using I too much because it detaches you, the speaker, from the group. Try to find other ways of structuring your ideas so that everyone feels included.
Right. Anne, are you ready for your next telephone call?
Oh, yes.
Okay, you need to get in touch with Mr. Bradford. He's a great author who has worked with us for years. He's quite friendly, and he's quite a wizard at the stove. He opened a restaurant a few years ago, but he sold it to move on to writing cookbooks. He knows 1,000 tricks in the kitchen, and he can make anything taste great, even tomato soup.
Oh, come on, stop it, Gary. I've only had half a sandwich today, and hearing about tasty treats is driving me crazy.
I know. Speaking of eating, when are we going to have dinner together?
You don't know when to quit, do you? Enough joking around. But let me give the kitchen superman a call.
Okay, but don't forget to pay him compliments. This guy just eats them up.
Hello, good morning. This is Anne Baxter from Pilgrim Publishing. Please may I speak to Mr. Bradford? Oh, Mrs. Bradford, hello. I've heard a lot about your husband. He's quite the chef, isn't he? Yes, I also enjoy cooking, but I'm not in the same league, of course. Well, I'm calling to propose a new cookbook series to Mr. Bradford. We're going to be taking it to press soon. Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, I'll hold. Good morning, Mr. Bradford. Hello, this is Anne Baxter from Pilgrim Publishing. First of all, congratulations. You're a legend around here. But as I was telling your wife, I'm calling to see if you're interested in participating in a new cookbook series that Yes, I know that you've always spoken to Gary Reynolds, but I'm the new colleague who's been assigned to this project.